Okay, folks, I'm going to try to do something just a little bit different today. One thing that I often notice with digital marketers or people that are, trying to work and generate and create marketing campaigns online is that they've often experienced little bits and pieces of digital marketing and how it kind of works on the internet. Maybe they've done email marketing, or maybe they've written some blog content and done sort of pseudo, content marketing, or perhaps they've run some PPC campaigns, done a little SEO, but they have, again, these technical skills and they know how to execute within the context of sort of that little piece of marketing, but they don't know how it all works on the internet. They don't know where those little pieces sort of intersect with consumers' behaviors and activities. So from a consumer perspective, a lot of times we're building campaigns and we know that they yield some results, but they would yield so much better results if we actually had a customer driven or customer focused sort of approach to our thinking about those campaigns. So anyway, my hope is to try to build a little bit of a presentation here that will help to link together some of these different disparate disciplines within digital marketing. And the first thing that I want to do is start with the end in mind, right? So in most of our cases, we're hoping to, at least in the context of Kaleido, but I think in a lot of digital marketing, our goal is to ultimately produce a lead, right? And a lead can be a couple different things. In most contexts, it's a list of information that generally includes name, phone, email, and ideally some info on their request, right? So what are they looking for? And then, of course, another version of this might be a phone call, right? So let's do 800 number phone here, just so we kind of understand where we're hoping to end up. So one of these two end results or outcomes. Ultimately, in order to get here, we generally need to get them to a website, right? And on that website, we need to start asking them some questions. Now, this is the way kind of we do it. We'll have some headline here. And this is again, I don't want to get too deep, but I might wander and this might ramble. Maybe you need to watch this on 2x speed, but it'll be, hopefully super helpful and informative, and maybe dig into some secrets that a lot of people don't, in a lot of detail that people don't get into. But this headline is often a positioning statement of some sort. At least that's my preference. And I think that works well. And then this extra content, this sort of teaser that goes into the actual progressive form or tries to get the person into the progressive form, is some form of benefit statement, right? What's going to happen if you fill this form out, or why should you fill this form out, or how is this going to get you closer to what you want to do? Give them a couple of options. We call these progressive forms. We're actually doing essentially a survey in most of ours. And just to give you some context, if you look at like LendingTree or any mortgage lending, Bankrate, a lot of times you'll see these progressive forms where they essentially start asking you questions, sort of yes/no questions, in the form of more or less a survey, but you are actually giving them information as you fill out that survey. And it's a really efficient way to get a lot of information from the lead with a lot of detail, so that you can actually help that consumer more efficiently. So ultimately, what happens is if you go through this form, then you will ultimately end up becoming a lead, right? And there's some other details to this page, and I've got some videos where I talk about what should actually be on this landing page to help ensure that you get a conversion out of that that first visit. But those are the basics, right? So you'll need a website or a destination. Now, some of our sites, and we won't talk about it quite yet, but there will be some situations like Facebook where all of this architecture, and they're pretty savvy this way, they've actually created for you. So they're actually collecting everything right on their site. So you don't even need to have a website. But for most digital marketing campaigns, the fundamental bottom line basics is to have a landing page where you encourage and guide the consumer into filling out a form, and then ultimately that produces a lead. So let's figure out how to get here, and again, how some of this digital stuff works. So one of the kind of easiest and most obvious channels to use, and a lot of times where we start, because you can get it going really fast and it immediately produces results. That's Google Ads, right? So in the context of Google Ads, we are doing a few things. So ultimately, that consumer is going to begin inside of Google, right? So they're going to begin inside of Google in this little search box. And regardless of, this is Google, okay, right? And this can come in a variety of different ways, right? It could be at the top of your browser, the URL bar. It could be on your phone. You could be talking to Siri. You could be talking to, Google's version of that. There's a lot of ways that you could essentially end up in this Google search box. And this is where everything begins. And whether you're using voice or you're using text, you're going to put some keyword in here. And keyword sometimes gets a little confusing because we think it's just a keyword, but a lot of times people are asking questions and typing out full sentences in that keyword. And as a result of that, you're going to, or the consumer is going to produce something that's, we often in the digital marketing business call a SERP, right? Which this is a search engine results page, right? Okay, and on this page, there's a couple different things. There are ads, right? There's a few of these up here. And then there are some organic results. Again, trying to use some of this lingo, right? These are organic, these are paid, right? They're somewhat similar, right? There's a headline and there's some description text here. And that's important when you're writing those, or even when you're doing your blog post. There's a couple of different things that you're writing in order to do here. You're doing a title, just kind of your headline, right? / headline. You're going to fill that in your meta, right? So in the case of organic, you're going to do that in your metadata, right? When you publish that blog post. If you're using something like WordPress, a lot of times you're putting that in Yoast, right? There's a tool that just kind of helps you manage that SEO. And then there's a description. And that's going to sort of put in here. And the other thing that often gets forgotten about here is these should be, engaging and inducing, even in the organic when you're doing your blog post, right? These are essentially blog posts or pages, right? You want to essentially write your title and your description to be like an ad, right? Because you're doing the same thing up here when you're doing an ad. You're writing a title and a headline, and you're writing a description. Now, there are some slightly more advanced ads, right, where you can put phone numbers and stuff like that in there. But they're essentially equivalent, right? Paid and organic are equivalent. It's just how you get here is a little bit different, okay? When we're talking about Google Ads, again, we're taking the shortcut. I drifted off into sort of the organic part, but this is blog posting, right? The Google Ads version, you're going to go into your Google Ads account, and you're going to do a couple different things, right, that you can do in here. One, you're going to have a list of keywords. And these are, you're sort of guessing, and there's a lot of tools that can kind of tell you how much of what we call volume, or how many of those searches are occurring in any given time period. But you're going to list a bunch of keywords, right? And you're going to put them in there, and you're going to tell Google that I'm willing to pay you money to bid on getting into one of these top positions, right? So one element of your Google Ads sort of strategy is going to be keywords. Another element of this is going to be targeting, right? So this is who you want to target, and depending on the type of industries or audiences that you're going after, your tools in targeting can vary quite a bit, right? So if you're in special housing or credit categories, you can't go after demographics and that sort of thing. But in other categories, you can get really specific. You can talk about age, you can talk about gender, you can talk about all those sorts of things. But generally, when we're thinking about targeting, a lot of times the keywords themselves are doing some of the targeting. So a lot of times we're focused on geo-targeting, right? Because most companies, unless you're huge, even the bigger ones have individual branches and locations. So oftentimes it's good to have strategies around those actual physical locations. So in most cases, there's a reason to sort of do some of that more specific geo-targeting. And then, of course, you're writing ads, and you're grouping those ads, into ad groups. And these things want to sort of logically be organized into these keyword groupings, right? And one of the analogies I always give around sort of how you should be organizing what you're doing in Google Ads is envision a person going into a grocery store and trying to figure out where something is, right? So it's pretty obvious. You go into a grocery store, you say, oh, all these fruits and vegetables and fresh stuff is over here. And then, oh, I see these freezer things. So there's kind of sort of freezer stuff that, would be in there. And then there's these individual aisles like, oh, that looks like there's a bunch of bread in there. That looks like there's a bunch of like crackers. And here it looks like there's a bunch of paper supplies. So you could kind of look at those aisles and you can get a sense of like, what will be categorized and grouped under here. That's what you want to do with your Google ad campaigns, right? You don't want to just throw a bunch of keywords in there. You want to look at those keywords and you want to think about your products and the sort of situations that people are in when they're actually going online, and try to organize those. And that organization will come into play for ad groups and ultimately campaigns. So you'll start to group those keywords together, because when you're doing this, Google wants this to be intuitive, right? So when we're actually talking about our paths here of how a consumer kind of comes to us, let's think about that for a second, right? So this is the consumer. Sometimes we talk about the consumer's journey, right? Okay, so I'm going to start, and again, this could be voice, could be text. There's a lot of ways you could end up sort of, one way or another in Google's search box. But there's going to be a keyword or a phrase or a question that's going to be done here. And Google wants this keyword, right, to make a lot of sense, right? So whatever you've searched for, they want to give you results, right, that are answering that question. And again, questions are increasingly important, right? Oftentimes, we're getting questions, right? But whatever the keyword is, whatever the question is, the results page, Google is trying to serve their customer. So they want this to very much help to answer the question that was asked, or very much helps to guide them to more information about the keyword that they searched for, right? And so that's what we're trying to do here when we're creating that ad, is we're trying to create that connectivity. And then as the consumer looks down through this page, they're going to try to select the item that is possibly going to give them the information that they were looking for. Now, sometimes the consumer will do that keyword, they'll get some stuff and they're like, that's not exactly, that didn't really, and so they'll go back here, right? And they'll do another search and they'll come back and look in here again. But ultimately, they're going to make some sort of selection, right? Oftentimes, that selection gets determined by where they are. We talk about funnels a lot, right? Where they are kind of in this funnel, right? And so there's different ways to kind of look at this. So if you're looking at it just kind of from a consumer perspective, you've got this, whoops. Somehow I got my eraser going there. All right, let's try to get the eraser off. Okay. So from a consumer's perspective, oftentimes you've got this sort of acronym going. Let's see if I can remember all of it, right? This is kind of awareness. And then they go into interest. And then there's a decision. And then there's action, right? So that's one way to look at it. Google kind of looks at it in a different way. And I sort of like this, right? Because this is describing what we're trying to achieve as digital marketers, right? They have this concept of acquisition, right? You're actually trying to acquire the consumer. This also, by the way, tracks in Google Analytics. This is the way they lay out and organize Google Analytics. Acquisition. And then there's some behavior on the site, right? As they're kind of looking around, trying to figure out what they want. And maybe this is on-site, maybe this is off-site. And then ultimately, there is conversion, right? So they actually take that action. And become a lead, right? So depending on where they are in this, maybe they're just trying to figure some things out, will potentially determine whether they click on an ad or they click on an organic. So just by nature of ads, oftentimes this is driven by sales people, right? And so salespeople are, notoriously impatient, right? And they want the sale. They're driving to the sale as quick as possible. So the way that they're going to write this ad, or the way that they're going to sort of approve the ads, is probably going to resonate more with, and I talk about this all of the time. I think this is I can't remember where I read it, but I believe this stat, that oftentimes when someone lands on your website over here, they're 70% of the way there. Right? They've already made the decision to inquire, or they already know what they're looking for. So they're already there. And so oftentimes in web design, and again, we won't talk about this today, but a lot of times in web design, we do all this throat clearing and we try to sort of convince them to learn more, take some action ultimately. And we spend a lot of time trying to prep them and trying to get them to a point where they're inquiring. But particularly if they're in kind of this phase, right? They're going to resonate with this kind of paid, advertising, because we've essentially sort of filtered that, because that's the way we're writing it. We're writing it more like a sales ad, right? And so that person that you're going to attract because of this ad and this type of traffic is probably somewhere, in this phase, right? Their interest, decision, action. So they're somewhere in here, and they're 70% there, right? Those are the people that are most likely. So sometimes we talk about this paid as having a higher intent, right? So paid having higher intent. I'm running out of room here. Okay. And as a result of that, when you push those here, they're probably going to take action up at the top of this page, right? So we want to make sure that we have this opportunity here, this 70% opportunity, right? For the customer that's ready to go, they're just ready to fill out the form, right? And so make sure that we can do that. The other thing that don't forget, which I don't have on here, is make sure that your 800 number is somewhere prominent, right? Or as an option, right? So they can fill out both. Okay, so let's go back. Keep rolling on our customer journey. Okay. All right. So that's the paid portion of that, right? Inside of here, the organic, so we talked about this, there could be some people that click on the organic. Now, because I would encourage you to learn to write some of your organic titles and headlines and descriptions more like paid ads, because you will simply get more clicks, right? Because of the nature of what you're doing here with that sales language. But generally, that's not what's actually done. And so these down here in organic land tend to be more informational, top 10 sort of guides, or, they tend to look like and be more research oriented. And that's okay, actually. And Google's probably done that to some degree by design. Because we do pages like that, right? We reserve the top part for the top 70%. And then the rest of this that we didn't really talk about down here is really to do some other things. As we move down the page, we'll educate, we'll inform of, maybe tell them about the process. We'll give them more information about maybe their different options. So as we go down the page, we're going to be more educational, more informational, and less sort of grabbing for the sale. The same thing tends to happen on the customer journey as we move down this organic side of the page. And so if you get a click out of these, you're probably going to get somebody that's going to move down this page and may not be as likely to convert, because again, these folks that are coming off of this are probably more in kind of this awareness phase, right? So people coming out of your organic is kind of more in this, they're looking in the awareness category of this funnel, right? And so what you're trying to do with your page, where they land or where they come from is really important as to what you're trying to accomplish, right? So if you get them off of organic, or you're looking at your Google Analytics and you're looking at your organic traffic, you have to know that they're probably in this awareness phase, and you're going to have to concentrate a lot of your attention on acquisition. Like, how do I get them to actually contact me, right? So I'm going to have to build some of this educational content here and try to get them to actually contact me. So some lower down here, I will do sort of the form and the lead again, right? And then if I get somebody at the paid, interest, decision, action phase, then I'm probably going to capture them right here at the top. And ultimately, all of this is trying to get to the lead. Okay. So we covered a lot there just to talk about how Google Ads work, right, on the internet. And this is just one approach, right? And you can see, even though we were talking about Google Ads, we kind of wandered into organic and blog posting and a whole bunch of other things here. But this right here is sort of how the internet works, right? The consumer doesn't even know, like, kind of what's going on here. Hopefully I've revealed some of the psychology and some of the things that we're doing in order to, ultimately do, what I think marketing is, which is guiding customers, especially online, because online is confusing, right? You get down here, you get a bunch of junk here, you get on a really bad website, it's hard to figure out what to do. And a lot of times there's so much going on and so much confusion and so much lack of clarity that the consumer just doesn't do anything. And it's a frustrating experience. So what we're trying to do as good marketers is we're trying to guide the customer to guiding customers to accomplish what they want. I told somebody the other day, accomplishing is something you do in college, right? Guiding customers to you accomplish things in college and school. You get things, right? Consumers want to get things. They want the easy button, right? They just want to get it. They don't want to work for it. They don't want to accomplish it. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to guide those customers to get what they want, right? And so by making this a clear process, by getting the right keywords, by writing better titles and headlines and descriptions, by trying to help them understand and showing them, where they are in this funnel over here, is helping them to get to a good, high quality page where you've already given them sort of two options. Hey, if you're ready to go and you're just ready to get it, this is how you get it. If you need to understand more about what we're going to do, you can kind of go down here and figure out some more stuff, and we can give you some more reasons to inquire with us. Now, a couple last things, and then we'll close this one up for Google Ads. I was going to actually go through a whole bunch of them, but I think that the detail is important, and probably shorten this down just a little bit. There's one other thing that happens here is the actual tracking of this information. So if you're using Google Analytics, switch over my no, that's not let me. Here we go. Okay, so let's grab another color here so we can be highlight this a little bit. Okay, so if you're using Google Analytics, a lot of this stuff is already done for you. So when someone comes from anywhere else on the internet, another page, and a SERP is another page, Google, because they have a tracking pixel, they can do a couple different things, right? They can collect where this person came from, right? So they can tell you through source and medium where they came from last. This is one hop. This is all you get is one hop. So they can tell you that, you know, all this Google Analytics and sort of what they do with this magic tracking pixel and some cookies and stuff like that is they can tell you where that person came from, right? And then once they've come to your site, you want to set up your own forms and funnels to track goals, conversions, right? So as we're moving down, the Google Analytics stack, right? We talked about acquisition over here, right? So acquisition, we want to figure out where do we actually get these people from? Source and media or medium will tell you that, right? So where did they come from first? Did they do a Google search? Did they come from another website? Being a referral? Did they come direct? Maybe you send it to them in an email. We can use things called UTM codes. We won't go into those today, but UTM codes, which adds to the URL, you know, so that you can track some of that, and we'll help you. So we'll talk about UTM codes in another video. Okay, so acquisition, source and medium, that tells you where people came from, the audience that you came from. And then the behavior, which I didn't really kind of cover in here, there in the behavior section, you can see what pages they're visiting, right? And landing pages and that's so you're seeing how they're kind of moving around the site. And then ultimately your conversion, figuring out how you got that lead, will be in goals and conversions. And if you have Google Analytics, once they hit the page, you'll be able to track that full funnel, right? You'll be able to see once they got to their website exactly what they did. And a lot of times they'll do some back and forth here, right? And so this funnel will be reflected and you'll be able to track that through Google Analytics. All right, that's all we'll kind of cover today as far as kind of how it works. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments